Rebbetzin Goldberg.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Goldberg, for being here today with Jarchei Kallo of Amsterdam. Probably many people don't know you yet, so it might be nice if you can introduce yourself in a minute or two, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me know when you're ready for me to start.
Please, everyone, mute yourselves so the sound will be better. Thank you. If you're ready, we're ready. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, my name is Ora Goldberg, originally from South Africa, but I live in London and I've lived here for a long time. And I'm not actually entirely sure how this evolved, that I got the opportunity to be speaking to you, but I'm very honored and privileged to be able to speak to you. I think it's one of the unique gifts that Corona has given us, amongst the other strange things that have come up, is this opportunity that the world has gotten a little bit smaller and we're able to connect with each other wherever we are in the world. So it's nice to be able to have this opportunity. And I know that it's like early-ish in the morning, so not everybody wants to have their cameras on, but thank you to whoever's camera is on, because the one downside to speaking on Zoom is that when everyone's camera's off, you're speaking a little bit into the void. So thank you for whoever has left their camera on. Okay, sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to change my screen here. Okay. Sorry, I just want to change my screen so I can. Okay. Right. So I'm not sure what topic you were told today's topic is, but the topic I'm going to be speaking on is tapping into the power of the month of Teves. Now, as far as I'm aware, there was a talk as part of this Jarchei Kallo, I think on Friday, about Asara B'Teves. I don't want to be dwelling so much on that. I want to talk more about the month in general and the spiritual and growth opportunities that come to us through the month of Teves. I'm just thinking, because of the speech that I heard before, I'm assuming that it's fine that I'm speaking in English. The other opportunity would have been for me to speak in Afrikaans. We could have experimented with that, but I'm not sure how they would have gone down. It was interesting for me to hear the end of that last talk and the similarities between the two, but I think we'll stick with English. Okay. So there is a concept that every month in the calendar has a unique blessing or unique kind of godly light that comes into the world. And we have a monthly opportunity to make ourselves a vessel for that light that comes into the world. What that means is that the world was originally created in such a way that a certain energy was invested into every month of the year. And that the way we experience the year, or the way that we're meant to experience the year, is that as we experience the chagim of the year, instead of experiencing a chag as just a way to commemorate a historical event, the way that we're supposed to go through the year is to understand that historical events happened because a certain energy was already invested in that month. Okay, so what that means is that long before that event happened, Hashem had already invested that power in the month. And because of that power, that's why specific things happened at specific times in the year. Okay, so for example, we have, let's say, Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the month of Av is known to be a tragic month. And the day of Tisha B'Av is known to be an intensely tragic day because 2 Beis HaMikdash was destroyed on that day. That's not a coincidental thing. It means that a month was invested with a very heavy energy of tragedy, and specifically that day was given the heaviest energy of tragedy, which is why the Beis HaMikdash could be destroyed on that day and on no other day. So what does that mean? What's the relevance of that for us, besides the fact that it's very interesting? What it means is that really, if we were living on an immensely spiritually aware level, which I'm sure lots of you are, but I'll just speak for myself, if we were living on an intensely spiritually high level, it would mean that really every day of the year, there is a spiritual energy that we can plug into to change our day, to grow through. Now, maybe it's a little bit difficult to live on that intense level all the time, but at least as each month comes in, and certainly as the yontifs come in, we have an opportunity to experience each chag by understanding what energy or what power is available to us. And the reason that it's relevant to us today as much in 2020 as it ever was is because what it means is that if the world was created with that energy invested in that month, which allowed certain things to happen at that time, it means that that energy is still present in that month. So I'll give you an example. In the month of Pesach, so when we sit at our Seder, we're commemorating an event that happened to the Jewish people. And all the things that we do at the Seder are commemorative of the experience that the Jewish people had, the maror and the matzah, and experiencing this experience that they experienced. But there's a much deeper level to experiencing our Seder, which is the idea that if the energy that was invested into that month was an energy of freedom, which meant that Jewish people could become free in that month, that means the energy of freedom is still available to us now, today, in 2020. So as I sit at my Seder, one of the things I need to be thinking to myself is, how do I plug into this personally? Yes, it's true, the context is different. We're not living in slavery, but we're enslaved by other things. What holds me back from being the best me? What are my limitations to achieving my best spiritual self? So as each Chag comes in, as each month comes in, it's useful for us to be aware from a spiritual growth perspective of what opportunity this month offers me, because every month has an opportunity like this, and some are more obvious than others, like when it comes to Av, like when it comes to Pesach, but every month has this opportunity. And if I allow myself to plug into that, what's meant to happen is that as we experience the year, we don't go through a year and land up back at that same place again. Oh, here we are again, it's Rosh Hashanah again, and I'm making the same New Year's resolutions, or I'm making the same promises to myself that I made last year. What's meant to happen is that if we engage in the month in the right way and grow through it in the right way, then when we get back to that same time of year again, we're a different person. And because of that, we're able to invest in that month on a much deeper level. We've grown from last time, and we're now at a different place than we were last Rosh Hashanah, last Sukkot, last Pesach, whatever it was. So this is the way that we're meant to be experiencing the year, the Jewish calendar, from a spiritual perspective. So it's worth our while to look at each month and figure out what is the opportunity here. It's almost like, where is the spiritual voltage that I can plug into to grow the most out of this month, so that when I leave this month, I am spiritually a different person than I was when I entered this month, and I can move on into the next month in a different way. And the spiritual opportunity that each month offers us, it's almost as if that month is the month to harness that particular ability or midah or power or whatever it is, so that if you really engage in it and really plug into it during that month, it's the easiest time to kind of lock into that power. Okay. So what that means is, as we approach this month of Teves, which is maybe slightly less obvious than other months, although we've had already some interesting aspects of Teves already, but one of the things that we can look at is that we want to know, how does this energy, or how does this power manifest itself in this physical world, and how does it affect us? What can we derive out of it? Where is the opportunity for spiritual growth for us? Okay. So according to Sefer Yetzirah, which is really the sort of earliest source of Kabbalistic work, which is associated with Avraham Avinu and with Adam Harishon, I'm not going to get like hugely Kabbalistic, because that's not my forte. I'm only going to take kind of layman's Kabbalah, let's put it that way, okay, the Kabbalah that's like accessible to all of us, just to use these as tools for growth during this month. But according to the Sefer Yetzirah, there is an idea that every month comes associated with many different things, okay? Every month is associated with different letter of the Aleph base, that is a powerful letter in the month. Every month is associated with a certain organ or body part. Every month is associated with one of the Shvatim. Every month is associated with like a horoscope, the Torah version of a horoscope, and a little sort of symbol for that horoscope. Every month is associated with actually a different color, like a different stone. There's many levels to this. Now, besides the fact that that's very interesting, we want to look at this as, so where within there can we find opportunities for growth? How are we supposed to use that to help ourselves grow? So I want to pull out just a few of these things in order to find an avenue for growth. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the shevet of this month, the powerful letter of this month, the body part of this month, and what we'll call sort of like the midah of this month, the area for growth and opportunity in this month. because like we said before, every month comes with a sort of an energy or an atmosphere. So we want to figure out what that is that we can use it. So the Shevet of this month is Shevet Dan. Just as a matter of interest, which I'm sure also has lots of deep association with this month, is that the Shevet of Dan were known for being the collectors. They would stay behind the Shvatim and clear up as the Shvatim moved from place to place. They were the ones who did all the cleaning up, which is very interesting in and of itself, but we're not going to go into that so much. The body part of this month, the organ associated with this month is the liver. Now, just as a matter of interest, when these things come up, if you hear anything in here and think, well, that's so interesting, I've had issues with my liver this month, or I've had, something, so actually somebody was just telling me the other day that they had gallstones that were causing them issues this month, which is connected to the liver. That's not coincidental. There's something very powerful about this month. And especially, by the way, if your birthday is in the month of Teves, this is all extra powerful for you because you're very associated with the month that you're born in, okay? So the Shevet of the month is done. The body part associated, or the organ associated with this month is the organ of the liver. The Hebrew letter with which this month was created is the letter Ayin. And the middah associated with this month, or the area that we're going to look at as an area for growth, is the area of anger. Okay? So we're going to look at these 4 things and see how we can use them as tools for our own spiritual growth. Now, some people say that the month of Teves is not a good month. It's a heavy month, okay? It's interesting because we've just come out of this kind of roller coaster of a lot of months of a lot of like spiritual growth. We've gone from, through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and all of that, and all the spiritual growth that comes with that. And then we had a quiet month just to kind of like catch our breath, and then we've gone into Hanukkah, and it's full of so much light, and we've ended off Hanukkah, and now we're a little bit in an interesting place. Like, where do we find ourselves in this part of the month post Hanukkah? And there's been Asara B'Teves, and now we're sort of floating a little bit. So let's ground ourselves and figure out where we are. So when people look at this month and say that this month is not a good month, like we know in life, everything can be looked at from a positive or a negative perspective, okay? So everything holds room for it to be potentially negative or potentially positive. Perhaps one of the reasons that it's associated with the negative is already because I mentioned to you that there's a concept of anger in this month, okay? So we already have a negative reaction to the concept of anger. And also that the tribe associated with this month is the tribe of Dan. And Dan is associated with Din, which is judgment, which means that there is an energy this month, or power this month, of judgment, okay? So there is something a little bit heavy about this month. Now, even the way that we look at anger and even the way that we look at judgment, it depends which way you're looking at it, because there is definitely a positive side to both of those things, okay? There is a positive side to anger and there is a positive side to judgment. So let's try and figure that out. So, well, when it comes to anger, you can be a person who lives your life in self-righteous anger, right? Getting angry about all the wrongs that are done to you all the time, okay? Or you can be a person who lives angry with your Yetzer Hara when it gets in the way of you doing what it's supposed to do, okay? That's the way to channel anger. We'll talk about other ways to channel anger, but there's different ways to look at it. And of course, the concept of judgment is that judgment is necessary also. It gives us a kind of a boundary and a structure, okay? So there is positive to that as well. Now, we learn the balance between, or the opposing sides of this anger, which can be seen in a negative way or positive way, from the relationship between Esav and Yaakov. So Esav is, of course, associated with negative anger, and Yaakov is associated with positive anger. Interestingly, their father is Yitzchak, and we know that the Avos are associated with 3 different middas. Each one of them represents a powerful middah, okay? So Abraham represents chesed, kindness, okay? But we know that the life that Abraham lives was so to the extreme of kindness that maybe it was sometimes like too kind, because he sometimes sacrificed himself for that kindness. So his son, who came after that, had to really balance out that extreme of kindness by being the exact opposite of that, which is that Yitzchak represents Gevurah, which is strength, which is judgment, which is almost a kind of a harshness in the world. Now, if you look at the life of Yitzchak, you see why Gevurah was necessary in his life and why he represents Gevurah, because he was, almost a sacrifice, willing to be a sacrifice. It represents his character trait, but he comes to be the opposite extreme of chesed. And then comes Yaakov, and Yaakov is Tiferes or Emes. And his midah is what balances out these two opposite extremes, because Tiferes is harmony. It's the balance between the two. It takes the opposite extreme of chesed and the opposite extreme of gevurah, and he kind of finds harmony between them and brings them together. So it's him who represents this positive, kind of like harmonious side to anger, of finding a way to take anger but sort of balance it out and find the truth in it, find the good in it. And he sits here opposed to Esav, who doesn't view the world in that way. He doesn't look for a positive aspect. He comes from a really angry place, from the bad kind of anger. Okay. And we have to be aware that when we talk about this idea of anger and how it applies to us, sorry, one second, how this idea of anger applies to us is that anger is something that all of us have in us. And it's not even something to view as, as we said, necessarily a negative thing. It's a part of our nefesh. It's a part of our essence. Anger is meant to be there, okay? But it's not our job to cancel it. And it's not our job to eliminate the possibility of anger. And you can't cancel or diminish your character. That's not a way to go through life. It's not a good thing. It's to try and cancel that character. The right way to do it is to try and channel that character and find the right outlet for that character and find a positive way to express that character trait. So our challenge in this month is to take the anger that every single one of us has inside us, because it's kind of like a passion. It's kind of a drive. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but to find a way to take that thing and channel it towards something positive. Now, we know that there are many levels of anger. So when we're talking about anger, we could be talking about the person who gets like mildly aggravated and frustrated. And we could be talking about the person that just flies off the handle and loses it completely. Okay, there's the option for both of those. So we know that there are varying levels of anger. So I'm telling you this, it's a joke, but I'm telling you this almost sort of as an illustration of the varying levels of anger. Okay, there's a teacher who stands in front of his class and he says to his class, I want to explain to you that there's various levels of anger. Okay, so this is an illustration of level 1 of anger. He picks up a phone and he calls a random number, and somebody answers the phone and he says to the person, can I please speak to Chaim? And the man on the phone says, there is no Chaim here, sorry, you've got the wrong number. He puts down the phone, and the teacher says, see, now that's an illustration of the first level of anger. He's not angry, but it's a bit irritating to have somebody call the wrong number. So I could hear he was getting a little bit prickly. Now, this is an illustration of level 2 of anger. He picks up the phone and calls the same number again. He presses redial, and this man answers the phone and he says, can I please speak to Chaim? And the man said, I already told you when you called me before, Chaim doesn't live here. Why are you calling me? So he says, okay, sorry. He puts down the phone. He says, now that's level 2 of anger, because he's starting to get a little bit, he's boiling up a little bit. He's getting a little bit angry with me. Now I'm going to show you level 3 of anger. He calls the same number again and he says to him, can I please speak to Chaim? And the man says, listen, I've told you already, Chaim doesn't live. Why are you calling me 3 times? I told you already that Chaim doesn't live here. And he slams down the phone. Now you see how that is level 3 of anger, because he's really starting to get angry with me. Now I'm not going to demonstrate to you level 4, 5, and 6 of anger. We don't want this man to fly through the roof, but you get the point, okay? So one of the students says to him, I'll demonstrate for you level 4 of anger, okay? So the student picks up the phone and dials the same number again. And when the man answers the phone, he says, hello, this is Chaim speaking. Did anybody call for me? And we don't know what the response of the man on the other side is, but we're going to assume that he did not take that well, okay? So that's level 4 of anger. The point of this illustration is that we know for ourselves that we'll respond to different things in different ways, okay? And some things will give us that mild irritation, like you called the wrong number. And some things, like, are you actually calling me to pick up your messages and I don't even know who you are, might send us to a very different place of anger, okay? So we do respond to the world in different levels of anger. And sometimes the source of that anger comes from worry. And sometimes the source of that anger comes from anxiety. And it doesn't always come from an innately bad place. Okay, you could be angry because your child didn't bother to call you and tell you that he was out, and he came in very late and you were really worried about where he was. So by the time he comes home, you're feeling very angry, but the angers actually come from a place of worry and care. So that could be the source of where anger comes from. But if you think you're exempt from anger, you have to check again, because every single one of us have some element of this somewhere inside us. Now, we mentioned that the organ associated with this month is the organ of the liver. And very interestingly, the organ of the liver is associated, actually not only in Torah, but we got there first. Okay, well, the organ associated with the middah associated with the liver is anger. Okay, it's very interesting because this is across the board. This is not just a Torah concept. So the Torah concept is actually the Gemara says that the liver gets angry. Okay, which means that that anger gets its source from the liver. Now we know that the liver is a blood-filled organ, okay, and we know that when we get angry, blood rises to the surface, our face gets red, we feel hot and angry. This is an association with blood and anger. But just as a matter of interest, even in like alternative medicine practices, in Chinese medicine and other sort of healing practices, they talk about the liver as the seat of anger. And actually, even in mainstream medicine, it says, which is just an interesting aside, that if it's left untreated, inflammation of the liver, which would be like a hepatitis or something like that, can damage the liver. And when this organ fails, when the liver fails, it stops removing toxic substances from the body. And the buildup of poisons can lead to a brain disorder that causes personality changes and loss of control, which is associated with anger. Okay, so it's very interesting that there's a lot of different aspects to this. It's not just a esoteric idea that the liver is associated with anger. There's some deep reasons for why this is. But it's interesting that, and it's not coincidental, that the organ of this month is the liver, which is meant to be, from even a Torah perspective, the source of where anger comes from. And the Gemara says that when a person loses, when a person's really angry, they lose control. And a person really gets to level 7 or whatever it is of anger, they lose control to the degree that the Gemara says, if he's a wise person, he loses his wisdom. If he's a prophet, he loses his prophecy. We lose our sort of like personhood when we get to this place of deep, deep anger. To the point that Chazal say that if a person is truly, really deeply angry, it's equated to avodah zarah. He's lost himself. Now, on a deep level, real anger, this level of real anger comes from ego, okay? Because if a person had no ego and didn't think highly of himself and didn't have very high expectations, he wouldn't get angry in the same way. Now, none of us really want to hear that, because we don't want to hear that our anger is ever associated with our ego. Me, never, because when I get angry, it's not to do with my ego, it's because I was really right and they were really wrong, right? That's not ego, okay, but that is ego, right? There is ego associated with us getting angry because it's an expectation. Actually, the more a person humbles themselves and diminishes their ego, naturally anger diminishes. And if a person wants to refine and work on their anger, then that means that ego has to get out of the way, because ego is the thing that's going to tell you you're always right. And ego is the thing that's going to tell you the other person is always wrong. And it's very hard to deal with anger if you're not willing to take that ego out of the way. But it's also very painful and it's very challenging. It's not an easy thing to do. Okay. Now, actually, we know that we are supposed to. It's a good spiritual practice to do a cheshbon hanefesh every day. And the time we recommended to do that is at the time of Shema, when the day is finished, to do a spiritual accounting of the day, to spend a little bit of time at the end of the day looking through our day and checking in on ourselves. Where did I go wrong? You should also check in on where you went right. Don't beat yourself up. There's lots of places you went right as well. But where did I not be true to myself? Where did I veer off the path a little bit and not be who I really can be? Okay, so we're supposed to engage in this. And when we engage in it from a truthful way, from a real place, then what we're able to see is that a lot of the time we got ourselves into situations in the day where we really thought we were right. There was no other way to it. But when we re-look at that situation again, maybe from a calmer place, maybe not within the situation, we realize, okay, maybe there was another way to look at that situation. Maybe I wasn't 100% right. Maybe the other person was right. Maybe there was another way to look at this. So if a person finds that they are experiencing their day from a place of anger and irritation again and again, then that should check where this is coming from. Now, I have to say as an aside that I do think that the specific times that we're living in, and coronavirus and isolation and quarantine and whatever else everybody's experiencing, has certainly tested us in this area, okay, because it's challenged us. And it's not coincidental. If you know, a lot of, I don't know where Amsterdam is in this regard, but in a lot of countries now, we're finding ourselves back in lockdown, back in new state of, it's not coincidental it's come in this month, okay? It's challenging us. It's challenging us. It's going to bring some emotions to the fore. And it's got some anger and irritation and aggravation are going to be somewhere inside there, okay? Actually, just as an aside, although I said I wasn't going to speak about the 10th of Teves, but I want to mention one interesting thing which is associated with this, which is that on the 10th of Teves, the Jews kind of got closed into the city, okay? And what's very interesting is that it says that the refuah always comes before the sickness, right? That the solution always comes into the world before the ailment. So it's interesting that it says that the issue that was already brewing was the idea of sinas chinam, of people not being able to get on with each other. And when the Jews were locked into the city all with each other, they had this opportunity to find a way to truly, really get on with each other and bring out the best in each other. And if they could have mastered that, maybe what happened after that wouldn't have happened after that. But the 10th of Teves was actually the trigger for everything that happened after that, which is really connected to why we are in exile now, is the 10th of Teves is connected to that, right? But the solution was put into the world before the problem, which is that they could have worked on, they were really forced to be together. So I find it interesting and not coincidental that for those of us that have gone back into isolation very close to the time of the 10th of Teves, isn't it interesting that in a month where we were historically forced to be together, forced to be in an isolation, forced to get on with each other, that here we have an opportunity to do a tikkun on that. We have an opportunity to work on this idea of being forced to be in close quarters again. And it is frustrating, and it is going to bring anger to the fore a lot of the times. But here we are in the month of Teves with a perfect opportunity to work on this, okay, to engage in this and work on this. So we said about this idea of different levels of anger, right? That you could be aggravated by little things, which happens to all of us at some point in time, and it doesn't affect us in a deep way. But if you experience an anger where you are literally detached from your vessel, where you become like not yourself, where you speak in a way that's unlike you, where you say harsh things, where you look back on it and actually feel a bit embarrassed of yourself, like, why did I say that, or why did I act like that? And this is whether it's to your kids, to your spouse, to your employee, to, this could come up in many different areas. Then when you get to that level, what you also lose is your Tselem Elokim. You lose your godliness, you lose your humanness, you lose the part of you that makes you you. So there's a very big difference between anger that's rooted in anxiety and worry, although we need to check on that as well, right? And the anger when you lose control, the anger where you lose yourself. Now we said that the letter, the powerful letter that's associated with this month, or the letter that created this month, is the letter ayin. And we know that ayin is also ayin, the eye. And it's a question as to why we were born with two eyes. Well, we can answer that from a physiological and it's useful to have two eyes. It gives you like well-rounded perspective, okay? But from a spiritual perspective, why do we have two eyes? So it talks about this idea that the job of the left eye and the job of the right eye are two different things. We have two different jobs. The right eye is the eye from a spiritual perspective that is meant to look inwards, okay? The right eye is the eye that looks inside ourselves. It's the eye of chesed, it's the eye of sort of softness, and it's the eye that looks at ourselves and figures out like, maybe it's coming from me. Maybe before I look outward, I need to look inward first. And the left eye is the eye more of din, more of gevura, and it's the eye that judges. It's the eye that judges, and it can sometimes judge harshly. And in fact, it's the eye that most often leads us to anger, because it's the eye that looks at the outside world and says, you see how wronged I've been? Did you see what that person just did to me? Did you see how they just spoke to me? Did you see how they just took my parking spot when I was sitting there waiting? That's the eye that's very quick to judge outside of us without checking inside. So our job really is actually meant to be the balance of these two eyes. And that ayin that created this month is a reminder that the eye is very instrumental in our journey through anger. It's a very useful tool in order to channel this anger in a positive way. So when we started off by saying that there's potential that this month is not a good month, I really mean it when I say it depends how you look at it. It depends which eye you look at it with. Are you looking at it with the left eye, or are you looking at it with the right eye? Because if you're looking at it with the right eye, you see inside there opportunity for tremendous growth. You look inward. If you're looking at it only with your left eye, you're looking at it with judgment. It's a pure opportunity to engage in anger. So yes, this month does have a certain atmosphere, and yes, there is a certain element of judgment. And look, if we look at the 10th of Tammuz, it's clear that this is a month of judgment. The Jewish people were judged in this month. You know, there was a trigger for things starting to happen this month that led to a very sad place for the Jewish people. So there is an element of that. Now, we know that the highest character trait from a positive aspect for a person to engage in is the character trait of anava, of humility. Okay, and the opposing character trait on the exact opposite side of that, the highest from a negative aspect would be gava, would be arrogance, would be really ego, I guess, haughtiness. So if a person can work on diminishing his gava, on diminishing his haughtiness and arrogance, and he really empowers his trait of humility, then anger and sadness are going to immediately decrease. Okay, so the minute he starts upping his humility, or we start upping our humility and decreasing our arrogance, immediately anger and sadness decrease. Why sadness? Because anger is associated with sadness. Because when we feel wronged by the world around us, when we feel that, you know, everyone's out to get us, that's also connected to sadness. It doesn't leave us feeling good about ourselves. We feel upset to be wronged by that, in that way. So when we diminish those two, both anger and sadness decrease. And we learn this from so many places in the Torah. And of course, the stories of all the others and the stories of the Torah are not just sort of nice fairy tales. But, you know, the point is that we're meant to look at those stories and pull out those midas and figure out how we can integrate that into our own life. So when we look at Avram, we know that the way that he speaks about himself is he says, and it's important to know, by the way, that when we talk about humility and diminishing one's gava and investing in one's humility, we're not talking about somebody who has low self-esteem. We're not talking about somebody who makes themselves into a doormat. We're not talking about somebody who diminishes their sense of self so that everybody can trample all over them. Nah, it's a very high sense of self-esteem because it's a recognition that you made B'Tselem Elokim, and you're just aligning yourself with Hashem. So saying Ani Afar Va'efer doesn't mean I'm just dust, who am I? I'm nothing. It means I negate my will. I put my own will aside for the will of Hashem. That's what humility means. So we see this also from Moshe Rabbeinu in many aspects, but we're going to draw out one story where this is evident, is in the story of Moshe and Korach. So what happens in the story of Moshe and Korach is just taking into account who Korach was. Okay, he wasn't just some random he was a troublemaker, but he wasn't just a random troublemaker. Okay, first of all, he was a billionaire. Okay, he was like the Bill Gates of the time. Okay, and he came with a lot of power. He came, you know, he was learned. He came with 250 men behind him who were all from the Sanhedrin. He had good backup. Okay. And he was, you know, outspoken. He had presence. It wasn't just that some person, you know, an upstart approached Moshe. This was a real, you know, this was somebody with substance. And he approaches Moshe and he says to him, "Who appointed you to be the leader? Who put you in this position? How do you get the right to decide who the leader is here? Why is it you? And the authority to appoint your brother as the Kohen? And who made you so knowledgeable?" And he proceeds to challenge him with some really tricky halachic questions, to put Moshe on the spot, to put him in a situation where his leadership is kind of like showed up, and he challenges him. So I think somebody's not on mute, and it might just affect the recording. So just check that your screen is on mute. So what would you imagine Moshe's response to this situation is? How does he respond? So listen, this is Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, leader of leaders, okay? What's his response? He doesn't respond by saying, "Do you know who I am? I'm Moshe Rabbeinu, okay? I took the Jewish people out of Egypt. I went up and received the Torah and brought the Torah down to the Jewish people. Do you know who I am?" Like, just back off a second. That's not Moshe's response. What is Moshe's response? It says, "Vayipol al panav vayevk," and he falls on his face and he cries. The leader of leaders is challenged in this way. He doesn't speak out and defend his leadership. He falls on his face and he cries. Why does he fall on his face and he cries? It says, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi says, he fell on his face because he has to ask himself, hold on a second, does Korach have a reasonable point here? It says that he had a feeling that maybe this had been sent to him as a messenger from on high to check in on himself, to check in on his own gava, that maybe he'd been directed by the wrong thing. So it says that when he fell on his face, he engaged in a kind of like a cheshbon nefesh. He lay on the floor and he checked in on himself. And it says that he wanted to check, was there any arrogance? And only after he thoroughly checked himself and found no trace of pride, he understood that Korach wasn't a messenger from Hashem, that Korach was a troublemaker. And that's when he answered him the way that he did. But he didn't respond with like, I'm the leader, back off. He responded with a total check, with a total using of his right eye before his left eye. He looked inside, what's going on inside. Now that is an example of real leadership, okay? That is a way to channel what could have come out in any other average person as enormous anger, was channeled in a very different way. So I have to use my iron to look inside of me. And instead of allowing the anger to come out the way that it does, that's the way to redirect, and to redirect it positively. And we know that actually it's very hard to do tshuva for anger, because the Gemara gives us a story about a man who asks, I'm not actually sure I have to say who it is that he asks. I don't know if it's his father or his teacher that he asks, but he says, how do I control my anger? And the advice that he's given is, you go home and every time you feel angry, you knock another nail into the frame of the door, okay? Comes back after a week and he says, well, now what do? I've got a door frame that is full of nails, okay? So he says to him, you go home and every time you get angry, you pull out one of those nails. So he comes back a week later and he says, well, now I've got another problem. I've got a door frame that is full of holes. Now what do? So the teacher says to him, well, now you're right. You do have a problem, because it's very, very difficult to fix those holes. It's very hard to take care of those holes now, okay? Because when it comes to anger, what we've done when we lash out like that and when we unleash that kind of level of anger is that we create a void, a hole in the universe. It's bigger than us, okay? We let something negative out into the world that's beyond us, and it's very difficult to call it back. Once you've said it, it's gone from you. You can't recall it. The damage is done. Even if you say sorry afterwards, and even if you really genuinely have massive regret over it, but it's not, and I'm not saying tshuva is impossible, but tshuva is hard for that. It's hard to engage in tshuva for the damage that's done from something like that. And it's a good picture to keep in our mind, is that door frame full of holes that are very, very hard to fill, that have created a void. So on the deepest level, when real anger ignites itself, it's coming from not just a ego source, but it's also coming from, on some level, which is also hard to hear, but something to work on, a kind of a lack of emunah. Because anger and faith are interconnected, because if we had 100% faith in Hashem, which is always something to be working towards, but never easy, okay, then by default, we become more humble. And we don't get so angry, because every time something upsetting or annoying comes our way, the emunah perspective is, Hashem has sent this my way. Hashem has sent this as a growth tool. Hashem has sent this person to irritate me on purpose. I'm supposed to be learning something from this, right? You know, we always say that the challenge of a Jew, right, or the holiness of a Jew, is that you don't see the idea in Judaism of like sort of a monk living on top of a mountain in somewhere where they engage with no one and meditate on a rock, and that is considered the peak of holiness. From a Jewish perspective, that is not considered the peak of holiness. You know why? Because you will not find holiness until you engage in this world. That's the point. The point is to have a mother-in-law, is to have a child, is to have a spouse, is to have an employee who annoys you, who triggers you, who knows which button to press, because that is going to be the place where your work is, and that's going to be the place where the best you comes out. It's not going to happen when you don't engage with the world outside of you. Actually, that's an easy way out. It's the hard way to engage in this physical world and to have relationships and to engage with people and to have your anger triggered and then to have to work on it and channel it in a positive way. That's the work, okay? So there is an association with some kind of emunah, and reminding ourselves that when these things and when these people and when these opportunities come our way, they came our way for a reason. It didn't come to someone else. You have that person in your life and not somebody else, because you need that person in your life and not somebody else. It is your area for growth, even when it's challenging. Another good example of this, and quite a timely example in terms of the parasha, is Yosef, because it tells us about Yosef that not only does he forgive his brothers, but he actually goes on to support them all for the rest of their life. Now, he would have been very justified and on quite a high level to turn around to them and say to them, I forgive you. I'm not angry with you. Now, please leave. I don't want to see you again. Like, they'd caused him a lot of grief. He would have been well justified in forgiving them, but wanting to move on. What does he do? Not only that, he says, stay here with me. And he supports them. How does he get himself to a place of such ultimate forgiving? Because, if you have a interaction with, let's say, a family member, right? And something happens, and you want to be the big person and get over it and forgive them, okay? So you say, I've forgiven them. But then every time you have like a family reunion or something and you see that person, still a part of you that like is a bit triggered or a little bit, you respond to that. Okay, well, then you haven't fully forgiven that person. To be in a place where you truly forgive that person, so much so that you invite them into your life and support them, how do you get to that place? The only way to get to that place is that he saw this as a lesson that Hashem had sent him. That this is the person he was supposed to become, and he could only become this through the experience that happened to him. So his brothers were sort of the messengers for this lesson. That's emunah. That's being able to look at a situation and not see the individuals and the bad that they did for that, but rather the lesson and the growth that came through that. That's why he could have ultimate forgiveness and move beyond that to be so giving and forgiving. So to be able to say this came from Hashem. We have many, many examples of this, but this kind of level of insight of Hashem's hand in this. We talk about David HaMelech with Shimi ben Gera, who curses him, and talks about Avishai ben Sruya, who was one of the ministers of the army at the time, who pulled out his sword immediately ready to kill Shimi. And David HaMelech stops him and says, hold on a second, don't hurt him. He cursed me because Hashem sent him here to curse me. Immediately, he doesn't look at the situation and say, look at that person with his left eye. Look at him. Look what he's done to me. He looks with his right eye. It's interesting. What lesson did I need? Look, Hashem sent a messenger to send me this lesson that I needed. So we don't get angry to the same degree if we have the clarity that Hashem sent us this test, that Hashem sent us this situation, that Hashem sent us this person. So because this month is the month associated with the liver, with anger, with the blood of the liver, right? Because it's associated with done and judgment, there's this heavy kind of atmosphere. You can be sure that during this month of Teves, some test is going to present itself to you, if it hasn't already, that's going to elicit some level of aggravation or anger. It's going to come up this month, okay? So it's a guarantee it's going to come up somewhere this month. Now, we never ask for tests and challenges. We love it every day that we don't get tests and challenges. But prepare yourself that somewhere in this month it's going to rear its head. Now, for some of us, that might be some minor aggravation somewhere. You don't have to wake up everybody waiting for the massive test. That doesn't mean that. But somewhere along the line, this midah is going to creep out of you, okay? And it might be, if you're the person who really struggles with this area, you might be struggling with this 20 times a day. And if you're a person who it's harder to elicit anger, you might find it in a more minor way, but it's going to come in some way for all of us, somewhere, okay? So we have to prepare ourselves for it. So these are the skills to prepare ourselves for it, is that our work this month is to keep our eye on the ball. And I really mean our eye on the ball, okay? Is that using those two eyes, using that first eye to reflect inward, and then when a situation comes up, our natural response is, what does it mean about me? Where can I grow? Where could I have gone wrong? Where might I have been at fault in this situation? And of course, looking inwards to remember where Hashem is in the picture. Clarity on Hashem sending us a message and Hashem sending us a challenge. And it's true that this is a month of Din, but I can make that positive because Din is boundaries and restrictions. But within the space of boundaries and restrictions is the room for growth and the room for spiritual greatness. That's where that space is. Only in the place of boundaries, spiritual greatness comes. I can't get rid of anger. Part of my nefesh. It's part of who I am. But I can direct it to Kedusha. I can filter it in a holy and meaningful way. And when I do, what's born out of that is the positive form of anger. Is that anger where I can be cross with myself that I stepped in the wrong direction, where I can be angry with my Yetzer Hara that it's getting in the way of my growth, where I can use anger to fight for justice, where I can use it in a, passion is a good thing. We want to have passion in life. We want to feel strongly about things, but we want to use that in a good way and channel that in a good way. So Teves, this month is for refining and reducing and recognizing the source of my anger, to question myself, is it anxiety or worry? Is it a lack of emunah? Is it ego? Who's making me angry? Is it my children? Is it my husband? Is it the fly that keeps landing on me? Is it me? Like, what is the source of this? Where is this coming from? And interestingly, we have to remember that we've just stepped out of Hanukkah, and that actually Hanukkah is a rare Chag because it falls over 2 months, that it did fall over the beginning of this month, right? That this month started with Hanukkah. So let's not forget that as much as we've gone into a month of heaviness and judgment and this power of anger, we've also just come out of the month of immense light. And actually, the day that ended off that time, which was present in this month of Teves, was Zos Hanukkah, which is power. That light of Zos Hanukkah is actually associated with the light that was present at the beginning of the creation of the world. That was the 36 hours of power light. It became this Or HaGanuz, this concealed light. It was taken out of the world because it was too powerful for the world. And we get a tiny glimpse of that light on Hanukkah. And on Zos Hanukkah, which is all of the light of Hanukkah coming together, we get a glimpse into that incredibly powerful light. So don't forget, that was present in this month as well. And that insight into that powerful light is an insight into the powerful light that each one of us carries inside us, that each one of us holds the potential to that powerful light, because deep down inside us, every one of us is good. Every one of us has light inside us. Every one of us has tremendous potential. We have to draw it out. And sometimes it gets hidden by the muck of living in a physical world of distraction and our anger and all the other midas and temptations that get in the way. But this month started off by reminding us that we are light. We are created with light, and we are light. So it would be justice to ourselves to spend this month digging deep to try and unearth that light and let that light come out. And in fact, it tells us that when it talks about the lighting of the candles in the Beis Hamikdash, it talks about one of the parts of the process of lighting the candles was called Hatavat Hanerot, which if you look at the word Hatavat, is associated with the word Tevet, with the month, with the letters are the same as the month of Teves. Okay, what's Hatavat Neros? The cleaning out of the candles. Okay, before the candles could be set up for the next day, because it was oil, because it was done with proper oil, it wasn't just chucking out yesterday's candles and putting new candles in. It was cleaning out the receptacles and the vessels for the oil and getting it ready for the oil for the next night. Okay, so what does that mean? In order to light the light, you have to get rid of the muck. You have to get rid of the dirt that was there in order to put the pure, clean oil in and light it again. So there's an association with Teves and this light that came from the beginning of this month to clean out what's getting in the way of that pure light shining. And Teves brings us this opportunity to engage in that, to be able to clean out the stuff that's in the way, our anger, our irritation, our frustration, our ego, our lack of emunah, to make way for that good light to shine out. That is inside every single one of us, bar no one. Every single one of us. This is the month to be able to find that powerful light and to engage in it. This is the month where that junk is going to come to the top, and it might come out in anger, and it might come out in frustration. But here's an opportunity to look at that and why that's happening, and to invest in that, and to really work on it, and to change this into a good month. It's got huge potential to be a good month. And the truth is that when we rectify that and we work on that, and this month becomes a positive month, and we make ourselves ready for next month, which is going to be Shvat, which is going to be the month of birth and growth, regrowth, Tu B'Shvat, and that's going to get us ready to step into the month of Adar, which is the month of joy, and we'll be in a place where we can be in joy. That is going to get us ready to step into the month of Geula, where we are going to be ready to be freed and to be back at the beginning, where we can get to the Beis Hamikdash and ultimately light those real candles, really those candles that original light came from, and find ourselves in a place where we are ready for the experience from a spiritual perspective, and we've really used this month to become our best selves. So thank you, ladies. I wish each one of you a meaningful, growthful Teves, where you can really use this time to introspect and invest and become your best selves and be ready for what the rest of the year has to bring us. And please, God, we should find that this, all through this process, this readies us to be ready for Hashem to withdraw this sickness from the world as quickly as He brought it. That's what's going to happen when it happens, is that as fast as it came, it's going to go. When we're ready for it to go, it's going to go. Please, God, we should see that very, very soon, and everybody should just be healthy and well. Thank you very much, ladies. Thanks for joining me.
Amen. It was beautiful.